Most people wouldn't think twice about a fire truck parked in someone's driveway. But in our neighborhood, it triggered a full-blown legal battle. I had just moved into the community with my family, and along with us came a fully restored, fully functional fire trucks, something that had been in my family for years. It was more than just a vehicle. It had a story, a purpose. But to the HOA, and especially one board member in particular, current it was an eyesore, a violation, and according to her, a threat to the look and safety of the neighborhood. At first, it started with passive-aggressive notes on my windshield. Then came the fines. When I ignored them, Karen filed a formal complaint with the HOA. A week later, I was handed legal papers. She was actually suing me for possessing emergency equipment in a residential area. Her tone made it seem like I was hoarding explosives, not honoring a family legacy. But what she didn't realize was that this fire truck wasn't just for display or for fires either. The whole neighborhood began whispering. Some took her side, others just watched from a distance. But what happened next? No one expected. Because the day came when that fire truck was needed and, not for the reason anyone thought. And when the truth finally rolled out with flashing lights, Karen and the entire HOA learned exactly why that truck was there in the first place. But by then, it was too late. The fire truck had been in my family for over 40 years. My grandfather was a firefighter, real one, and after he retired, he spent years restoring that engine down to every last bolt. It wasn't just a piece of history, it was a promise. He always said, "You don't wait for help when you can be help." That stuck with me. So when we inherited the truck and moved to this new neighborhood, I made sure it was maintained, fueled, and always ready just in case. But I never thought it would cause this kind of drama. Karen, on the other hand, saw it differently. She was the self-appointed watchdog of the HOA, always watching from behind her blinds, jotting down license plates, filing complaints about garden gnomes and trash cans left out too long. So when she saw the fire truck, it wasn't just something she didn't like, it was something she needed to handle. During one HOA meeting, she stood up and said, "This neighborhood is not a museum. We don't need an antique emergency vehicle attracting attention or inviting danger." She even claimed kids would try to climb on it, that it was a safety hazard. Most people just sat there quietly, not wanting to get involved. I said nothing. Not yet. But I kept a copy of that meeting's minutes. Behind the scenes, I started to notice something strange. People I hadn't met before were slowing down in front of the house. Some even took photos. That's when I began to realize someone besides Karen was also paying attention. The photos being taken didn't feel random. Cars I'd never seen before would slow to a crawl in front of our driveway, some even stopping for a few seconds before moving on. At first, I thought it was just curiosity people wondering why a full-sized fire truck was sitting in a residential neighborhood. But then a black SUV started showing up more often, always with tinted windows, parked just far enough down the street to not seem suspicious, unless you were really watching. Meanwhile, Karen's lawsuit was moving forward. The HOA board voted to support her claim, saying I had violated neighborhood appearance codes. They framed it as a visual obstruction, but anyone who read the HOA handbook could see it was a stretch. It felt more personal than procedural. My wife was worried. My kids were confused. The truck, once something we were proud of, now felt like a spotlight on our front yard. I started pulling it into the garage more often, but even then, Karen took pictures and submitted new complaints about unauthorized commercial vehicles being stored on private property. Behind the curtain of legal threats and neighborhood gossip, I started digging. I wanted to know why Karen cared so much, why she was so persistent. That's when I discovered something strange in the public records. Her brother had once been involved in a civil case against a volunteer fire department. The details were vague, but the timing matched. It couldn't be a coincidence. And suddenly, her obsession made a lot more sense. The deeper I looked, the more pieces started falling into place. Karen's brother had filed a civil lawsuit nearly a decade ago, something about negligence during an emergency response. The details were sealed, but it clearly left a scar. It explained her bitterness toward anything related to emergency services. But instead of dealing with it, she had made it her mission to keep anything resembling that life out of sight, out of mind. And now, my fire truck had become her new target. The tension hit a boiling point the night we got the letter from her attorney. Not just another fine this time, it was a court summons. She was officially suing for violation of HOA code, nuisance presence, and endangerment. It felt unreal. The fire truck had never made noise, never caused any incident. But that didn't seem to matter. Then came the night everything changed. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to sirens not from the truck, but from down the road. Flashing. Lights painted the inside of our bedroom. I ran to the window and saw a glow in the sky orange, flickering. A house 4 doors down was on fire. Smoke rose fast, and the street was chaos. I threw on shoes and bolted for the garage, but when I hit the button, nothing happened. The door wouldn't open. I realized with a sick feeling someone had jammed it. And worse, the city trucks were nowhere in sight. That's when it hit me. We might be the only help within reach. I yanked at the garage door, trying to force it up manually, but it wouldn't budge. Someone had chained it shut from the outside. My wife ran out behind me, and we both looked at each other, confused, panicked, and then angry. I raced around to the side gate, heart pounding. The fire down the street was growing fast, and I still hadn't heard a single city siren nearby. Every second counted. I got to the truck through the back entrance, but I couldn't drive it out. That chain was tight, like it had been put there deliberately. Who would do something like that? And then I saw it right at the edge of our property, barely visible in the dark. Karen standing under a streetlight, arms crossed. She wasn't on the phone. She wasn't yelling for help. She was just watching my wife grab bolt cutters from the shed while I radioed the volunteer dispatch. They were already overloaded and delayed. That's when I realized we really were the only help nearby. I had the equipment. I had the training. But now, I was being held back literally by the very people trying to protect the image of the neighborhood. We finally cut through the chain and got the garage open. But just before starting the truck, my wife pointed to something under the rear tire, a long metal spike. Someone had tried to sabotage us. That's when I stopped seeing this as a petty lawsuit and started seeing it for what it really was. I threw the spike aside, did a fast walk around of the truck, and made sure the tires were still intact. Somehow, they were. Within seconds, I fired up the engine, and the roar echoed through the neighborhood like a call to action. My wife jumped in beside me, and we raced down the street, lights flashing. The house was already half engulfed in flames, and neighbors stood frozen on their lawns, unsure of what to do. We didn't hesitate. I grabbed the hose, and my wife helped uncoil it. We started hitting the flames just as they reached the roofline. The heat was intense, but the pressure was good, and the water hit hard. Finally, after what felt like forever, city fire trucks rolled in, their sirens finally piercing the air. They took over, but by then, most of the damage had been stopped. The family got out safely, and the structure was still standing. One of the fire chiefs came over and asked where I trained. When I told him, he nodded with real respect and said, "Good thing you didn't wait." By morning, word had spread. The HOA board called an emergency meeting not to support Karen, but to question her behavior. Photos had surfaced of her near the garage. Her lawsuit quietly disappeared. But the final twist came later that week, when I got a letter in the Mail not from the HOA, but from the fire department. They wanted to partner with me. And the truck. Turns out, it wasn't just for fires after all. The letter from the fire department felt like closure in the best possible way. They offered to officially designate my truck as a volunteer emergency responder vehicle for rural areas and special events. It was their way of saying thanks, not just for what happened that night, but for being ready when it counted. I accepted without hesitation. The same truck Karen once tried to sue me over was now part of the county's extended emergency response network. And the best part? It was legally protected under a new community safety clause passed by the very HOA that once tried to ban it. Karen didn't show her face much after that. Rumor was she quietly stepped down from the HOA board. The chain on my garage, the spike. Behind my tire, no one ever came forward, but the board never pushed back on my cameras going up. They knew. Everyone knew. But no one wanted to say it out loud. As for the neighborhood, things shifted. People who had once stayed silent now waved when I drove by. Some even brought over coffee, wanting to see the truck up close. It wasn't just a symbol of emergency response anymore. It was a reminder that you never know who your neighbor is or what they're capable of doing when in the end. That fire truck wasn't just for fires.